We have our first actual look at some of the gear in Season 10 of New World, Nighthaven, and it's looking very interesting. Some good, and if I'm honest, some that has me a little bit concerned. Now, I don't want to be premature because Season 10 and the expansion is looking absolutely amazing, but yes, I have a few concerns. So let's go through what we have, and you'll also notice this right here. So the devs have been posting in Discord. They've seemed to let their guard down a little bit and have posted little teasers here and there and a lot of snippets of information that you're gonna want to pay attention to. So let's talk about it. Very sneaky edit here that you may or may not notice. Come and join me on Twitch. We'll be streaming New World Season 10 just all the time. And if you want to join my guild, we're on Nisa and we're purple. Everybody's welcome. Hit me up in the Discord, hit me in the chat when I'm live or something. Get an invite. Everybody's welcome. This right here is obviously like a work in progress version of the mount that is going to be from the second boss in the raid Isle of Night. It's going to drop at a rate of something like 0.5%, I think they said in the dev video, and it should actually be sellable. So some people don't like it, but that's what you're going to get with cosmetics. You're not expected to like everything. So if you don't like it and you get it, then you're going to sell it for a tidy profit. For the rest of us who think it's pretty dope, then, you know, we'll just keep it or buy it. It is what it is. Apparently they tried it without the armor and it was a little bit too bright, which sort of makes sense because it's glowing neon. But yes, that's the mount and it looks pretty damn dope. Then we need to talk about this. So we know, as per the dev video, what's going to happen is every weapon that was single stat based scaling is going to get an additional attribute attached to it. If you already have 2 stats, then that's not a problem. You're just going to be left unchanged. But if you were the fire staff and you scaled purely off intelligence, well, now you're also going to scale off dexterity. We're not 100% sure what these alphabet numbers refer to. They did say in the dev video, but it was very confusing. I would assume that this is a 95%, 65% split, but I don't know that for sure because it doesn't say that. Now you're getting letters instead of numbers, which might be clearer for some newbies, but for me, I just find it unnecessarily complicated. I would rather just have the number. Either way, fire staff is going to be fire staff, which is going to be intelligence and dex. The warhammer, now a lot of the other ones aren't necessarily obvious, but we can infer them from this. For example, the grey axe, which is like right here, that's intelligence, so that's going to be strength and intelligence, probably a similar scaling to the fire staff. The live staff is actually included here, so that's going to be focus and intelligence. The warhammer is included in the dexterity one, so that's going to be strength and dexterity. And then there's a couple that aren't listed in this image, so we're going to have to guess them. The first one would be the bow. The bow is not scaling up intelligence like the musket. I would assume that the bow is going to be strength. Obviously, technically it could be focus, and that just seems unlikely, especially considering you get the heavies on the bow using like the 50 strength. So I think strength makes sense for the bow on a few levels actually. And then the other one not listed here would be the ice gauntlet. The ice gauntlet obviously scales off intelligence, but the secondary stat, interestingly, is either going to be strength or focus. I would guess focus, but we don't know. That one's a little bit more uncertain. I think bow will very likely be strength. Ice gauntlet, probably focus, but who knows? The whole thing there is to open up more builds. For me, I'm a little bit worried that it's not going to open up more builds, but you know, the jury's out on it. I don't actually know right now. The only other thing is that some of the scaling on the artifacts are going to change. So for example, you might be thinking, what's going to happen to Abyss? Abyss already now scales off intelligence. Well, it only scales off intelligence if your intelligence is higher than your strength, which that's just going to go do away with. That's not going to be the case anymore. And what it's actually going to do is scale off your intelligence, and I would assume your strength equally, because they said on the Void Gauntlet it's going to scale off intelligence and dexterity equally. And when it says equally, I don't mean like 50%, 50%. It might be more like the Great Sword, which is probably going to be 80%, 80%, or 81%, 80%, I think maybe technically, which is a B and a B if you're keeping track of the alphabet letters, which I'm not. Inferno, I would assume, would just scale off strength and intelligence, but 50-50 again. Sort of confusing, but okay, it is what it is. Then we get our first look at a couple of the actual systems in the game. Here we have the new version of Umbral Crystals, which has got its own new icon. It's not the old one, and it does what we think it does, right? The Umbral Crystals can be used to upgrade gear score items of 700 or above. Then it says a weekly cap of 4,000 and a weekly reset of like, well, 7 days is what it's going to be. There's a bit of confusion here on my part. Basically, I get that there's going to be a weekly cap and the goal is for you to be able to upgrade anything from 730 to I think 800 5 times with 5 different items, and that's the weekly amount that they want. But is there an actual currency cap? Is the weekly cap and the total currency cap different? The numbers are obviously being played with in the back end, because this was once actually 8,000 on Discord. It was 1,000 when they spoke about it in a dev video or the article before, and now it looks like it's possibly going to be 4,000. So is the weekly cap the same as the total cap? Bit of confusion there, we'll have to wait and see. But the idea here is that you can only get so many per week, and I don't think you're going to be able to store it forever. Well, you'll be able to store it forever, but you won't be able to just accumulate it every week to an indefinite, like unlimited number, which is interesting. We don't know the details of that exactly yet. But what this does show is that it shows us how you're going to get the Umbral crystals. So it does mean that you don't need to salvage your gear, at least we wouldn't think so, because it's not on here. They say the source is going to be the mutations, the raid, the catacombs, elite chest. So elite chest runs back on the menu, outpost rush, capture the flag 3v3 arena, and the PvP reward track. That might ease your concerns, it might not, but I think basically it's going to come from most content that you actually do. And it's going to look very similar to what we used to have, apart from instead of it being an item, it's going to be a currency. So it's just going to be in the bottom, I would assume. And they give an example here, this item going from 730 to 780, and it costs 250 Umbral shards. We also know that the Umbral shards are going to scale, so it's going to be cheaper at the low end and higher at the higher end. Interestingly, the coconut, I think, has been confirmed not to be able to upgrade artifacts from 700 to 725 because you're just going to use this system, and I'm guessing it'll be relatively cheap to do that. Now, this image, they didn't actually say where the source of this item comes from, but it does show you what the gearing is going to look like. I photoshopped a version a couple of weeks back. Everybody else has done their own version, but now we've seen, well, we can see what it is actually going to be. And basically the gem slot is staying pretty much unchanged. However, there is a big update with gem slots in the fact that they are now not guaranteed to be on every item. I mean, technically they weren't guaranteed to be on every item because of artifacts, but they are literally 0 to 1. It does mean that there are going to be quite a few items that aren't going to have a gem slot, and you can only have one max. Whereas the rest of the slots, I think you can have up to 4, I would guess. I don't know if there's a limit. Somebody said 2. I'm not, that's unsubstantiated. I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, not every item's going to have a gem slot. But what are we looking at here? We're looking at something like a trash item that you'll get in the new area, I would assume. This actually could just be like a playtester thing, but in theory it's going to be infix perks at the top, then it's going to be the charm sockets including the gem socket. Still a little bit annoyed that they said instead of 1 gem socket you're going to have 3 sockets, but actually what it is instead of 1 gem socket you're also going to have 3 other socket potentials. But you have your sockets, which is going to be anywhere between, well, I guess 0 to 4, and then at the bottom these are just perks. They're not infix perks because the infix perks are powerful perks. These are just normal perks that we used to have, except you'll see this 2 here. This 2 basically doesn't mean tier 2, it means version 2. There's no expectation that a version 3 will come. People are expecting that because some of the stats, some of the percentages and stuff like that are very low. So they're thinking, oh, maybe if I get the tier 3 version, it'll be higher. Nope, that's not the plan. It's just to indicate it's version 2 of perks. So that explains that, but there's more examples that are a little bit more complicated. So let's jump in. This is an example of something that you are going to craft. Now you might be wondering about the gear score. Keep in mind that Umbral shards can just get your gear score up to max anyway. So effectively the gear score is not as relevant. It's just going to save you Umbral shards. But what you'll see here is that crafted gear, or at least the max crafted gear, is going to have 3 slots and then 2 perks. No infix perks, no set bonuses. And take note again that there is no gem slot in this rolled set. Now the RNG here is going to be pretty epic depending on what you can actually pick when you craft. You're going to have the perks being random, you're going to have the charm slots themselves being random. There's a lot of RNG just in like standard crafted gear. There's going to be a lot of RNG across the board, which is the thing that I mentioned at the start where my concern comes into this, and I'll elaborate more as we carry on. But that's what crafted gear is going to look like. How you're going to craft that and what you're going to craft it with, well, that's where it gets even more interesting. Matrices, as in weapon matrices, armor matrices, and jewelry matrices, they are still going to be useful. We know the chromatic seal is going to be useful in the gem perk creation, but we didn't know about matrices. Matrices are sticking around, and they're going to be used in the crafting of the gear that you just saw and the old recipes. That does mean technically prismatics are going to have a purpose. Now, I think that gear that we saw there is kind of like pre-bis. I think it's supposed to fill in the gaps. I don't think it's supposed to be your main gear, but we now know that matrices are going to be relevant. That could affect the market in a big way. I mentioned it then. For the actual charm perks themselves, we're not sure what you're going to use to craft it, apart from the fact we are sure it's going to involve a chromatic seal. Chromatic seals are currently bought from your faction vendor for 5k gold plus some faction tokens, so don't buy them now because they're on a daily cooldown, because the price of them are going down to 2,000. So do not buy them yet, it will be an absolute waste, and you'll only need them in the creation of the charm perks. We have though seen what that system is going to look like. How will you actually put them in place? Well, there's going to be an attached perk, attached charm thing from the main menu when you click the item, and then you're going to be able to pick which perk on the left, and then you're going to be able to find the perk charm that you currently have. Obviously, it'll probably only show the ones that you currently have, and you'll be able to search and do all this kind of stuff. You'll click attach, you'll then get a screen that looks like that. You'll click confirm, and then your charms are attached. It is worth noting that charms can't be removed, as in it's not like you can take it out. The charms are lost if you replace them. So you can replace them, you just can't keep it if you take it out. Does that make sense? A little bit like what we have now, I guess. Here's another screen that just shows it's pretty much the same thing, including gems, which is interesting. Now the keen-eyed amongst you will realize that we did have an artifact, and it's a new artifact. It's the Incinerating Hatchet, which I believe is a work in progress name. But what this does allow us to do is talk about what is happening with your current artifact. So this perk at the top is something we would call an infix perk. It applies to the artifacts and to other types of gear. The difference with it being an artifact means that it is unique to that artifact. You will not see it anywhere else. Then what's going to happen is you're going to have 2 perks as normal that are built in, and you would normally have a 3rd perk that you can change. Well, that 3rd perk is going to become a slot, the type of which will be built when they decide it, I think. And what I think's happened here, the reason there's 2 is obviously the attribute as a stat is going away. That's not going to be a perk on your gear. That's just going to be built into your character. With that, they've then put in an extra slot. Now, a bit of me wonders, will you be able to get gems in some of these? Because at the minute, looking at this, there's no way of getting a gem into this. But I will expect that this to be relatively common. Basically, 1 infix perk, 2 normal perks, and then 2 slots. Either a gem slot and a charm slot, or just 2 charm slots of various different types. Interesting, but might be concerning if you want gems. Right, let's talk about set bonuses. I'm not going to go through all the set bonus gear. They're actually shown, I think, either 2, 3, or even 4 sets at this point. Quite frankly, I don't want to talk about the meta of those sets until we actually see them all. They might be completely garbage, and some of them might just be much, much better. But let's just talk about how we expect some of the gear to look. Effectively, there's going to be 5 perks on everything. It's just going to be different types. So here, what we have is we have 3 slots, 3 charm slots, including a gem slot. Let's just call that a charm slot. Then 2 normal perks, and then the set bonus. The set bonus is completely different from the normal perks. So effectively just an added on. So very likely you're going to want the set bonus gear. I think that's the pinnacle gear. But if it doesn't fit your build, then you might not want that, because you're going to have like 2 normal perks, and maybe those perks are going to be garbage. So these 3 at the top you get to pick. These 2 you don't get to pick. They're just normal randomly generated perks, depending where this item is from. If it was named, technically they could pick the perks themselves. And then the set bonus, this is a 2 to 4 set bonus. And if you're wearing 2 of this gear, you get 15% increased healing on targets outside of a sacred ground or beacon. And if you're wearing 4 pieces of it, you get healing increased 15% and cooldown reduction 5% on heal after holding a weapon for 10 seconds. Weird way of wording that, but basically if you've not switched weapon in 10 seconds, you get that. All right, cool. Let me show you something similar but different. Again, there are 5 perks and then a set bonus set here. But notice very clearly the one at the top, it doesn't have the circle around it. That is an infix perk. It's a powerful perk, but not an artifact level perk, basically. Well, it can be an artifact level, but the artifacts one will be unique. So this one basically has 1 infix perk, 2 slots, 2 normal perks, and then the set bonus. And this one is pretty complicated, so I'm just going to read it just because it's easier. Magical weapon abilities do 7% less base damage, but they store a charge of that weapon's element for 20 seconds. Activating an ability of a non-magical weapon will consume the charge and add 10% weapon damage as that element to that attack for 10 seconds, 3-second cooldown. My brain's a little bit broken just reading it, but effectively, if you use a non-magical weapon with a magical weapon, the non-magical weapon will do a charge of damage that you've saved up, but you're doing less damage overall. And then the second bit is you can charge up to 2 charges of that for each element, while at 2 charges though, you can gain 10% resistance to damage of that element. All right, pretty cool. I don't really know, like these kind of sound like trade-offs. They sound like some positive and some negative. There'll be some like area here where some builds will definitely need it, but I don't necessarily know if you'll need it across the board. But what it does do here is it gives an example: infix perk, 2 slots, 2 normal perks, and then the set bonus. This is an example of a gear where there's no set bonus, but there's an infix perk, 2 slots, and then 2 fixed perks. This is an example that you might get from an M3. Now, I'm not sure about the gear score, so let's not worry about that. It does actually confirm you need the expansion to get this, which we sort of already know, but Amazon just don't seem very clear in saying it. But you can see here what you get is you actually get 4 slots and 1 perk. This is confirmed to only come from M3s. Now, the beauty of something like this is that the RNG is less. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not really less in a sense, because all of these normal perks, as far as we can work out, are effectively randomly generated. So you might get your fantastic item with the set bonus that you want from the raid, but if it actually has 2 perks that are just garbage, maybe you want this, but you know, these perks are just garbage, which, to be fair, one of these pretty much is. That item, it might not be useless, but won't be optimal for you, and you might have to do the raid several times to try and get the exact item you want with the exact role that you want. The RNG here could be absolutely through the roof. Now, some people might enjoy that chase. To me, that sounds very concerning. Also, it doesn't sound that fun. Some of my fun memories of getting gear is like, let's say I was chasing Frigid Dawn, I was chasing an artifact. As soon as I got the item that I wanted, I didn't have to check the perks. It was just, yes, I got it. What might happen here is, like, let's say you're doing a raid, you might get the item you want, but then you have to open your inventory, check what the inbuilt perks are, see if they're any good, and you may have to check the order or the selection of the slots. Yes, you can have 2 skill slots. I think that might be the max for skill slots. I think the rest could be any number. By the way, it would have been nice if they were color coordinated, but they're not, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the randomness might come in the slot choice. Maybe that's going to be complete random as well. There'll probably some kind of like favoring. I suspect weapons might favor 1 or 2 skill slots just by default. But this one, for example, doesn't have a gem. Maybe you'll only play this if it has a gem. You got to get in there and find another item. It just looks like a lot of RNG, which does have me a little bit concerned. I don't really like the sound of that gearing system. I want to get that like dopamine. As soon as I get the Frigid Dawn, as soon as I get the thing that I'm looking for, the name of the item that I'm looking for, I want to go, yes, there it is. I don't want to go, hold up guys, let me read the perks. Oh, that's all right. It's got mostly decent perks, except this one, it's garbage. We'll just have to wait and see till I get it again. Now, I'm not asking there for gearing to be instant. I appreciate that a lot of people want a little bit of a grind, but I'm just not sure this RNG perk selection and slot orientation really sounds that fun. But I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see. I sort of feel like it's not going to be much change. I think getting close to this is going to be relatively easy, and then I think getting like best in slot, like pure best in slot, might take a very long time, which is fine. But I also don't think it necessarily sounds amazingly fun, which is a shame because I'm really in love with the content. I like the look of the raid. I really hope that this gearing is better than what it looks from my outside perspective right now, and we'll find out on Monday. It's literally right around the corner. Not much else to talk about apart from we do have confirmation that the Hive of Gorgons, Trial of the Devourer, and Mutated Expeditions will all be up leveled. We kind of assumed Mutated Expeditions would be, because otherwise why would they be giving you like really good gear? That would be very, very strange, but confirmation nonetheless. The big question for me at the minute is what's going to go into these slots. The big question for me is how we're going to craft these charm slots. We know it's going to be weaponsmithing, armoring. I'm guessing the third one is engineering, but actually they didn't say that in the video. Could technically be arcana. And we know it's going to use a chromatic seal, and we know it's going to use some of the materials, I think, from the new zone. But what else is it going to use? Is it going to use any of the prismatics? We know matrices are going to get used in crafting, but is this going to use any of the prismatics? I didn't say, I completely forgot about this one, but it is important, especially when it comes to the crafting and stuff like that. Somebody said, are we getting a increase in trade skills? The answer is no. It kind of replies to a reply, but the answer right quite clearly there is no. So there's no cheesing XP or anything like that this time around. Well, unless you're not 250 professions, but don't worry about that. But yeah, we're not going to go up in that, but there are new materials. So the question how we're going to fill those charm slots, we don't know. Some new material plus old material, I would guess. There's also a question about like, what are you going to do while leveling? Is it going to be worth spending 2,000 gold per charm and per slot whilst you're leveling? Keep in mind that some of the gear might not be something you want to use at the end game, but actually you still could use it at the end game. It's going to be very interesting, and right now we don't know the answer, but I am very excited. I don't want to seem like a doomer on the progression, on how you're actually going to get gear. It's just that the amount of RNG is a little bit worrying right now. Hopefully it will not be as bad as it's looking to me from an outside perspective right now. When we play it, it'll all be hunky-dory, because as I said, the zone is looking great, the catacombs is looking great, the raid is looking good. I'm excited. Let's see how it goes. I'll be there on Twitch, in Discord, everything. You know how it is. Come join me. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. I just trumped. I don't know if that'll pick up on the microphone. I just trumped. Goodbye.